Hello, everyone. I'm Carla Moha, and I wanted to share with you some tips for eating out gluten-free and with celiac disease. Living with this for many years, I've learned a lot over the last several years about eating out. Before I share these tips, I'm going to quickly share with you that the more flexible you can be in eating out and with your companions or whoever you're eating out with, the better. You'll find that if you make it difficult to eat out, your invitations to go out will dwindle. And sometimes, even though you are flexible, sometimes people will leave you out because they think they're helping you by not having you have to watch them eat things that you can't have. So make it clear that you want to be included and that you will work with their choices so that they're not having to go out of their way to accommodate you. So, with that said, I want to go ahead and share my first tip here with. So, this first tip here may seem like, is this really a tip? Of course, I won't. But steer clear of restaurants that definitely will not be able to accommodate you. I mention this as a tip because while I ask that you be flexible with your companions and where to eat, you can also kind of steer them from places you know that you absolutely won't be able to eat. Some examples of that might be Chinese restaurants. I have found aren't usually as able to accommodate gluten-free. One example is Panda Express. The only gluten-free item on their whole menu is white rice. Probably a big cross-contamination risk there too with all the items, but again, you could just have white rice there. So restaurants that you know will just not be a go, definitely steer clear of. Another one would be, a full-on gluten bakery that doesn't have any sort of gluten-free options. Steer clear of those. But as I said, be flexible, but you could kind of steer friends when they're deciding where to eat. You can, not mention the Chinese place that you know you won't be able to eat at. All right. So, next up on the tips I'm going to share is tip number two. Choose restaurants that cook fresh from scratch. This isn't always as easy to pick out, but the reason I do this is because when they cook from scratch, they know the ingredients in their food. And you just tend to be able to get safer food. And the cooks and wait staff tend to know what's in the food a lot more often. Of course, sometimes it can be more expensive as well. So if you do have a choice of restaurant, farm to table restaurants, or as I said, restaurants that advertise that they cook from scratch or cook fresh ingredients tend to be a little bit easier to work with because a lot of times they can just accommodate you because they're cooking from scratch. They can leave an item out altogether and make more of their menu accessible to you. That is definitely what I have found to be the case. Third one, choose items on the menu that are naturally gluten-free. Um, Now, this is one that, again, you might think, oh, well, okay, yeah. But what I'm talking about here is, especially if a restaurant doesn't have a dedicated gluten-free menu or you're a little bit hesitant about whether they will be safe with your food, I always try and stick to the items that I know that are naturally gluten-free. Things like salads. But the minute they have croutons listed as an ingredient, I kind of steer clear from there because I don't always trust that they'll remember to leave them off or that they won't put them on accidentally and take them off without me knowing, leaving behind crumbs. So I like to pick salads that I know don't have um, croutons on them, or things like plain shrimp cocktail or um, clam, uh, steamed clams. Things like that are things that you know are going to be gluten-free. Chances are you're not going to have nearly the same risk of cross-contamination. I've been to some fancy restaurants. One time I got sick. They swore up and down that the item was gluten-free, but it was something they had adapted. And unless their chef is 100% um, on board with cooking for a celiac, they may just have done something they didn't realize was cross-contamination or something along those lines. So this you'll be safer if you stick to items that are just more naturally gluten-free. Corn shell tacos are another good one. I always make sure that the corn shells are not dipped in the common fryer or that they're not homemade because sometimes homemade corn shells will have flour thrown in there as well. So the store-bought soft corn tortillas are fine or the store-bought hard shells. And so um, otherwise, if they cook from scratch, they can probably tell you if the ingredients are gluten-free. So that's kind of my suggestions there. The least number of adaptations that they have to do, the better the chance that you will have a gluten-free meal. All right, number four. I don't like drawing attention to myself, especially when I know sometimes my companions might think that, I'm being a pain or that might affect being asked out again by friends, but let the wait staff know you have celiac disease or gluten allergy intolerance, etc. I know that celiac is not a gluten allergy, but I have just gone with calling it an allergy because they always ask me, is this an allergy? And I just say yes, because then I know they will take the protocols instead of just assuming it's an intolerance and just not cooking with gluten. The allergy, they'll be more careful with their gloves and their treatment. Even if you order something naturally gluten-free, I sometimes make sure, or I try to make sure that I tell the wait staff I'm gluten-free. I'll say, I know this isn't listed as having gluten, but I just want to make sure because I've had surprises where bread has come on top of my salad, or on top of my omelet or things like that. Um, but also it just helps in their preparation and the care that they take. I personally don't talk to the wait staff and say, "Do you wash every pan or wipe every griddle?" I I am a very sensitive celiac, and but I think that that goes overboard. I think if you let them know to be careful that you have this allergy, that is usually enough. You start getting overboard. Um, it's just too much. It's too much for your table and the restaurant. It becomes a burden on them as well. So, with that said, tip five, if you don't think they're being careful enough, you can order just a drink if you're not confident in the food. And I've done that many times when I'm like, oh, I could probably order this, but do I really want to be throwing up in an hour or so? Violently? No. And I'm not willing to take that chance, especially if I'm not going to be somewhere near a bathroom. So I order just a drink, like a drink, soda, water, obviously a gluten-free drink, not a beer. But I order some sort of drink so that way I can enjoy companionship. I don't feel like I'm not, that I'm at a restaurant not ordering anything and I can just be there because I've definitely gone to places and the wait staff has not made me feel confident in their protocols when they're like, well, I don't think it has gluten in it, or they'll go back to the chef and say, yeah, this chef doesn't think so either. And, if they're not as confident, I just don't trust it. And as I said, or if you end up at a restaurant where you can't eat something, just get a drink. And with that said, you got to always make sure you have a snack in your purse. I'll sneak off to the bathroom and eat my snack in the bathroom if I'm hungry, so I don't get tempted to eat things that I shouldn't. And I always make sure I leave with a semi-full stomach too, so that I don't get tempted to take chances that I wouldn't normally. So, with that said, there's five tips. I believe in going out to eat still as a celiac. It was something I loved before I got diagnosed, and it's been many, many years. And for the most part, I've been able to successfully navigate going out to eat. Obviously, there's always that chance of getting sick, but the more you can minimize it, the more you can enjoy life. So, stay tuned for more videos and tips about being gluten-free. Thanks. Bye-bye.